The first gunshot cracked through the morning air like thunder, sending birds scattering into the cloudless sky. Thomas Harrington dropped to the ground instinctively, his camera clattering beside him on the dusty trail. The second shot confirmed his worst fears. Poachers had returned to the Crescent Valley Wildlife Sanctuary. Thomas pressed his body against the earth, breathing in the scent of sun-baked soil as he carefully reached for the radio clipped to his belt. His fingers, calloused from years of fieldwork, trembled slightly as he whispered into the device. "Base, this is Thomas. Shots fired near the east boundary, requesting backup immediately." Static crackled in response. Then Vivian's voice cut through, terse with concern. "Copy that. Rangers are 10 minutes out. Do not engage, Thomas. I repeat, do not engage." But Thomas knew that in 10 minutes whatever was happening could be over. Another magnificent creature lost forever to human greed. He'd seen it too many times before. The scars of his profession weren't just the ones visible on his tanned skin. They ran deeper, etched into his soul with every animal he couldn't save. He crept forward, each movement deliberate and silent. The terrain was familiar to him. This sanctuary had been his home for years. As he reached the crest of a small hill, he pulled out his binoculars and scanned the valley below. What he saw made his blood run cold. 3 men in camouflage clothing were surrounding something white on the ground. Even from this distance, Thomas could tell it was a white lion, one of the rarest animals in the sanctuary. The creature's coat gleamed like fresh snow under the morning sun, a stark contrast to the dusty savanna. The poachers had their backs to him, focused on their prize. One held a rifle while another prepared what looked like a tranquilizer gun. The third was speaking into a satellite phone, gesturing emphatically. Thomas knew he should wait for backup. It was protocol, it was safe, it was smart. But when the white lion raised its head weakly and let out a low, pained growl, something snapped inside him. Before he could reconsider, Thomas was sliding down the hillside, using the tall grass as cover. His heart hammered against his ribs as adrenaline flooded his system. He pulled out the emergency flare gun, the only weapon he carried, and fired it directly above the poachers. The bright red flare streaked across the sky with a piercing whistle, startling the men below. In the crucial moments of confusion that followed, Thomas burst from the grass, shouting and waving his arms. "Sanctuary Rangers, you're surrounded. Drop your weapons." It was a desperate bluff, but in the chaos it worked. The poachers scattered, the man with the satellite phone dropping it as he fled. The one with the rifle hesitated, swinging the barrel toward Thomas, but the distant sound of an approaching vehicle, Rangers responding to the flare, made him think better of it. Within moments, they had disappeared into the thick brush. Thomas approached the white lion cautiously. It was an older female, her magnificent coat dulled with dust and what appeared to be blood on her flank. A tranquilizer dart protruded from her shoulder. Her eyes, startlingly blue against her pale fur, regarded him with a mixture of fear and defiance. "It's okay," Thomas whispered, knowing full well the absurdity of trying to soothe a wild predator. "I'm not going to hurt you." As he inched closer, he noticed something unusual about this lion. She wasn't just any white lion. She was Tara, the sanctuary's most treasured resident. Born with leucism, a rare condition causing partial loss of pigmentation, she had become something of a legend. But Tara should have been with her pride in the protected central region, not alone near the boundary. The dart in her shoulder explained part of it. The poachers had drugged her. But why was she separated from her pride in the first place? Thomas radioed Vivian again. "It's Tara. She's been hit with a tranquilizer. Send the vet team immediately." "Tara, that's impossible," Vivian replied, confusion evident in her voice. "According to this morning's report, she was with the Pride at the watering hole." "Well, she's here now," Thomas said grimly. "And she's hurt." He stayed with Tara until the sanctuary vehicles arrived, lights flashing and dust billowing behind them. Dr. Yuri Kazan, the sanctuary's head veterinarian, leapt from the lead vehicle, medical kit in hand. Yuri's expression shifted from professional concern to shock as he recognized the lion. "How did she get all the way out here, and alone?" "That's what I'd like to know," Thomas replied, stepping back to give the vet space to work. Vivian joined them, her dark hair pulled back in a tight ponytail, her ranger uniform crisp despite the heat. "The poachers?" "Gone," But they left in a hurry. Thomas handed her the satellite phone he'd recovered. Maybe this will tell us something. Yuri worked quickly, examining Tara with practiced efficiency. The dart is standard tranquilizer, but there's something else wrong with her. His hands moved gently over her body. She's dehydrated and there's an old wound on her flank that's infected. Will she be okay? Thomas asked, unable to keep the concern from his voice. Yuri nodded slowly. I think so, but she needs proper care. We need to transport her back to the medical facility. As they carefully loaded Tara onto the transport vehicle, Thomas couldn't shake the feeling that something was deeply wrong. White lions were incredibly rare, and Tara was the sanctuary's crown jewel. Poachers targeting her was no coincidence, and her separation from the pride, that wasn't normal lion behavior, especially for a pride's matriarch. Back at the sanctuary headquarters, a sprawling collection of rustic buildings nestled against a backdrop of acacia trees, Thomas paced outside the medical building while Yuri and his team treated Tara. Vivian approached, her expression troubled. I checked with Bailey. He swears Tara was with the pride this morning during his rounds. Bailey was their most experienced ranger, not someone who would make a careless mistake. And? Thomas prompted, sensing there was more. And I've been looking into that satellite phone. It's registered to a shell company, but I found something interesting. She handed him a small object, a business card that had been tucked into the phone case. It bore a simple logo, a golden paw print, and the words Eclipse Expeditions. Thomas's breath caught. Eclipse? They're supposed to be a legitimate safari company. Supposed to be, Vivian agreed grimly. But I've heard rumors. Exclusive experiences for very wealthy clients who want more than just photos of wildlife. Trophy hunting, Thomas said, the words tasting bitter on his tongue. Maybe. Or exotic pets. A white lion would fetch an astronomical price. The door to the medical building swung open, and Yuri emerged, pulling off his latex gloves. His expression was unreadable. How is she? Thomas asked. Stable, Yuri replied. But there's something you both need to see. He led them inside to where Tara lay sedated on an examination table, her breathing steady, her magnificent white coat stark against the stainless steel. Look at this, Yuri said, pointing to a small area on Tara's shoulder that he'd shaved clean of fur. Thomas leaned in, confused at first, then stunned as he realized what he was seeing. Beneath the fur was a small tattoo, a series of numbers and letters, WL7462. A tattoo on a wild lion. Vivian's disbelief mirrored his own. This isn't just any tattoo, Yuri said quietly. This is a specific identification system used in private breeding programs. The implications hit Thomas like a physical blow. Are you saying Tara isn't from the wild? Yuri met his gaze steadily. I'm saying that everything we thought we knew about her might be wrong, and there's something else. He moved to a computer and pulled up a series of images, close-ups of Tara's teeth and bone structure. Based on these markers, Tara is significantly older than our records indicate. We've had her documented as around 8 years old in her prime, but these indicators suggest she's closer to 15, elderly for a lion. Thomas felt as though the floor was shifting beneath his feet. Tara, their beloved white lion, the symbol of the sanctuary, wasn't who they thought she was. So what are you saying? He asked, though he was beginning to piece it together himself. I'm saying, Yuri replied carefully, that Tara may have been planted in our sanctuary, and given the timing of these poachers showing up, I'd guess someone has come to collect her. The three of them stood in stunned silence, the implications expanding like ripples on water. If Tara had been placed in the sanctuary deliberately, who had done it? And why? And how many other secrets were roaming their supposedly protected lands? As if sensing their thoughts, Tara stirred slightly on the table, her blue eyes opening to fix on Thomas with an intelligence that seemed almost human. In that moment, he made a silent promise to the magnificent creature. He would uncover the truth no matter where it led. What he couldn't possibly know was how that promise would change everything. For him, for the sanctuary, and for the mysterious white lion who had appeared in their lives like a ghost, carrying secrets as pale and dangerous as her ivory coat. Outside the medical building, The African sun beat down mercilessly, casting long shadows as afternoon crept toward evening. Birds called in the distance, and somewhere a pride of lions was missing their matriarch. Or were they? Thomas's certainties were crumbling, and in their place questions bloomed like thorns. Who was Tara, really? And what shocking truth was waiting to be uncovered? The sanctuary's main office buzzed with tension as Thomas spread out a map across the conference table. Dust motes danced in the shafts of late afternoon sunlight that streamed through the windows. Outside, cicadas had begun their evening chorus, a rhythmic backdrop to the crisis unfolding within. "Eclipse Expeditions has 3 camps within a day's drive of us," Thomas said, marking each location with a red pin. "If they're behind this, they'll need somewhere to keep Tara before transport." Bailey Wilson, the senior ranger who had reported seeing Tara with the Pride that morning, leaned forward, his weathered face creased with concern. Despite his insistence, doubt had crept into his eyes. "I swear I saw a white lion with the Pride," he murmured, more to himself than the others. "I've been doing this job for years. I don't make mistakes like that." "No one's blaming you, Bailey," Vivian assured him, though her tone carried a hint of skepticism. "But we need to consider all possibilities." "Including the possibility that there's another white lion out there?" Yuri asked, raising an eyebrow. Thomas looked up sharply. "What are you suggesting?" The veterinarian shrugged, just thinking aloud. If Bailey saw a white lion with the Pride, but Tara was near the boundary, maybe our record-keeping isn't the only thing that's flawed. A heavy silence settled over the room as they considered the implications. 2 white lions would be extraordinary. White lions weren't a separate species, but rather a rare color mutation of African lions. Having 2 in the same vicinity defied statistical probability. "We need more information," Thomas finally said, straightening up. "Vivian, what did you find on that satellite phone?" She pulled out her tablet and swiped through several screens. "The call history shows frequent contact with a number in Dubai. The text messages are in code, but there are coordinates that match our eastern boundary, and a timestamp for this morning." "So they knew exactly where to find her," Thomas mused. "But how? And who tipped them off?" The unspoken question hung in the air. Was there a traitor among the sanctuary staff? Vivian cleared her throat. "There's something else. I did some digging on that tattoo identification. WL7462 is registered to a private wildlife collection in Dubai owned by Ezra Farahman." Thomas's jaw tightened. He recognized the name. Farahman was a billionaire collector known for his private menagerie of rare animals. Legal according to international loopholes, but ethically dubious. "I met him once," Bailey said quietly. "He visited the sanctuary about 3 years ago, showed particular interest in our anti-poaching measures." His laugh was hollow. "Guess now we know why." Yuri's phone buzzed and he glanced at it. "Lab results are in. I ran Tara's blood for any unusual markers." He scrolled through the report, his expression growing troubled. "There are traces of a specialized nutrient supplement in her system, one used exclusively in captive breeding programs." "So she definitely came from a private collection," Thomas concluded. "But why plant her here? And more importantly," Vivian added, "how did they get her into the sanctuary undetected?" Bailey shifted uncomfortably in his seat. "That would require inside knowledge of our patrol patterns, camera positions, the works." The implication was clear. Someone at the sanctuary had helped. Thomas turned to the window, watching as the golden African sunset painted the savannah in hues of amber and bronze. Somewhere out there, a pride of lions was settling in for the night. A pride with... What? A different white lion? No white lion at all? Everything he thought he knew was being called into question. "We need to check the pride ourselves," he decided. "Tonight." "That's not protocol," Vivian began. "None of this is protocol," Thomas cut her off. "Someone has been playing us, Viv. They put Tara in our sanctuary for reasons we don't understand yet, and now they've come to collect her. I want to see that pride with my own eyes." Bailey nodded in agreement. "I'll drive." As dusk deepened into night, the 3 of them set out in a rugged safari vehicle, night vision equipment packed and rifles loaded with tranquilizers, standard precaution for night excursions. Yuri stayed behind to monitor Tara, who remained sedated in the medical facility. The sanctuary transformed at night. Without the harsh sunlight, sounds carried farther, and the air filled with the calls of nocturnal creatures. The headlights carved a path through the darkness, illuminating occasional reflective eyes that quickly disappeared into the undergrowth. Bailey navigated confidently, following game trails he knew by heart, until they reached the acacia grove where the Pride had last been seen. Killing the engine, he gestured for silence. Thomas lifted night vision binoculars to his eyes and scanned the area. There they were, the familiar shapes of the Pride, 11 lions in total, most of them sleeping in a loose circle. The dominant male was awake, his massive silhouette unmistakable against the night sky as he surveyed his territory. But there was no flash of white fur among them. "See for yourself," Thomas whispered, passing the binoculars to Bailey. The senior ranger looked for a long moment, then lowered the binoculars, his expression troubled. "I don't understand. There was a white lion here this morning. I'd stake my reputation on it." "Could it have been something else?" Vivian suggested gently. "Maybe light playing tricks, or—" "I know what I saw," Bailey insisted, though doubt had crept into his voice. Thomas took back the binoculars and scanned the area again, methodically this time. Something caught his eye, a glint of metal at the base of a nearby acacia tree. "Wait here," he murmured, slipping out of the vehicle before the others could protest. Moving silently through the grass, years of fieldwork guiding his steps, Thomas approached the tree. There, partially buried in the dirt, was a small device no larger than a coin. He carefully dug it out and returned to the vehicle. Under the dim interior light, they examined his find. "It's a micro-camera," Vivian breathed, turning it over in her palm. "High-end, wireless." "So someone's been watching the Pride," Thomas concluded. "But why?" Bailey took the camera, examining it with narrowed eyes. "This isn't sanctuary equipment. We don't use this brand." Thomas felt a chill that had nothing to do with the night air. "We need to sweep the entire sanctuary. If there's one camera, there could be others." "That would take weeks," Vivian protested. "We have over 50 square miles of territory." "Then we start with the areas around Tara's Pride and work outward," Thomas decided. "And we do it quietly. If there is a mole, we don't want to tip them off." As they drove back to headquarters, Thomas couldn't shake the feeling that they were missing something obvious. The pieces didn't quite fit together. Why go to the trouble of planting a rare white lion in a wildlife sanctuary, only to try to poach it years later? And what about the white lion Bailey had seen? The headquarters came into view, its lights a beacon in the darkness. Thomas was so lost in thought that he almost missed the flash of headlights on the access road behind them, headlights that quickly went dark. "Stop the car," he said sharply. Bailey hit the brakes. "What is it?" "Turn off the lights. Someone's following us." In the sudden darkness, they waited, listening. The distant sound of an engine reached them, then faded. "Could be another ranger patrol," Vivian suggested, but her hand had moved to her sidearm. "At this hour, without lights?" Thomas shook his head. "Call it in." Bailey radioed headquarters, requesting an identification of any vehicles currently in the field. The response confirmed their fears. No other sanctuary vehicles were authorized to be out. "We need to get back. Now," Thomas urged. Bailey restarted the engine but left the lights off, navigating by moonlight. They had nearly reached the headquarters when Vivian's phone buzzed with a text from Yuri. "Come to Med Building immediately. Bring no one." Thomas and Vivian exchanged worried glances. "What about our tail?" Vivian asked. "You two go to Yuri. I'll loop around and try to get a look at whoever's following us," Bailey volunteered. Thomas nodded. "Be careful." As Bailey drove off, Thomas and Vivian hurried to the medical building, hands never far from their weapons. The night felt charged, as if a storm was brewing, though the sky remained clear and star-filled. The medical building was dimly lit, only emergency lights illuminating the corridors. They found Yuri in the examination room, standing over Tara's still form. His expression was grave. "What's wrong?" Thomas asked. "Is she—" "She's stable," Yuri assured him quickly. "But look at this." He pointed to a small incision he'd made near the tattoo on Tara's shoulder. "I was running some additional tests, and I found something embedded under her skin." With forceps, he carefully extracted a tiny metallic object no larger than a grain of rice. A tracking chip. Vivian recognized it immediately. Advanced model from the looks of it. "Not just any tracking chip," Yuri corrected. "This is military grade, satellite-enabled. Someone wanted to know exactly where she was at all times." Thomas felt a surge of anger. "Farriman. It has to be. He planted her here, tracked her for years, and now he wants her back." "But why?" Vivian asked, voicing the question that had been nagging at all of them. "Why go to all that trouble?" Before anyone could respond, the power went out, plunging them into darkness. Emergency lights flickered on seconds later, casting eerie shadows across the walls. "That's not a normal power failure," Yuri said, his voice tight. "The backup generator should have kicked in immediately." Thomas's radio crackled to life, Bailey's voice coming through in a tense whisper. "Intruders at the main gate. At least 3 vehicles. Armed." Thomas's mind raced. With the power out, the security systems would be compromised. They were vulnerable. "They're coming for Tara," he realized aloud. "We need to move her." "Move a sedated lion?" Yuri looked at him incredulously. "Where?" Thomas was already pulling out his phone, bringing up a map of the sanctuary. "There's an old research outpost in the western sector. It hasn't been used in years. No one would think to look there." "We'd need the transport vehicle," Vivian pointed out. "It's at the maintenance shed. I'll go get it," Thomas decided. "Yuri, prepare Tara for transport. Vivian, contact headquarters. Tell them to lock down and call for backup from regional authorities." As Thomas slipped out of the medical building into the night, the distant sound of engines grew louder. The intruders were getting closer. Whatever secret Tara represented, it was valuable enough for someone to risk an armed incursion into a protected wildlife sanctuary. And Thomas was determined to discover what that secret was before it cost them everything they had worked to protect. The stars above seemed to watch with cold indifference as he raced through the darkness, the fate of one extraordinary white lion, and perhaps the entire sanctuary, hanging in the balance. Thomas crept through the darkness toward the maintenance shed, his senses heightened. Every rustle in the brush made him freeze. The armed intruders hadn't reached the central compound yet, but their vehicles were getting closer. The low rumble of engines carried on the night air like distant thunder. At the shed, Thomas found the transport vehicle keys exactly where they should be. But as he turned to leave, a shadow moved near the doorway. "I was wondering when you'd show up," a familiar voice said. Thomas spun around, reaching for his tranquilizer gun. "Bailey?" The senior ranger stepped into the dim emergency lighting, his expression unreadable. "You need to understand something, Thomas." "Understand what?" "That you're working with them." Thomas kept his voice steady, despite the betrayal crushing his chest. Bailey had been his mentor since he'd first arrived at the sanctuary. "Why?" Bailey raised his hands slowly. "It's not what you think. I'm not with the poachers. I'm with the Wildlife Intelligence Network." "The what?" "International Undercover Operation. We've been tracking a global ring of exotic animal smugglers for years." Bailey reached into his pocket and pulled out an identification card Thomas had never seen before. "Ezra Farriman isn't just a collector. He's the financier behind a massive smuggling network, threatened species disappearing from sanctuaries all over Africa and Asia." Thomas lowered his weapon slightly, confusion battling with relief. "So you're not the mole?" Bailey's face hardened. "No, but I know who is." He nodded toward the medical building. "Yuri's been on Farriman's payroll for years." The revelation hit Thomas like a physical blow. "Yuri? But he's treated Tara. He discovered the chip." All part of the act. Once he realized we were onto the operation, he had to appear to be helping. But he's been feeding information to Farriman's people since before Tara arrived. Thomas's mind raced, reassessing everything that had happened. "The white lion you saw this morning." "A decoy," Bailey confirmed. "Drugged to look like Tara from a distance, enough to keep up the illusion that she was still with the Pride, while the real Tara was being positioned for extraction near the boundary. But something went wrong with their timing and you interrupted the pickup." Thomas started the transport vehicle, its engine purring to life. We need to get to Vivian and Tara before Yuri does something. Already alerted headquarters, Bailey said, climbing in beside him. But Farriman's men will be here any minute. We need to move fast. They drove without headlights, navigating by moonlight. As they approached the medical building, they saw Vivian emerging, her posture alert, weapon drawn. "Vivian," Thomas called softly as they pulled up. "Where's Yuri?" Her eyes widened at the urgency in his voice. "Inside, preparing Tara for transport." "Why?" "He's with them," Thomas said, jumping from the vehicle. "Bailey's with wildlife intelligence. Yuri's been working for Farriman all along." Comprehension dawned on Vivian's face, followed quickly by determination. "The transport crate is ready. I'll cover you." The three moved silently into the building. In the examination room, they found Yuri administering something to the sedated lion. "Step away from her," Thomas ordered, raising his weapon. Yuri froze, then slowly raised his hands, a syringe still clutched in one. "You don't understand what's happening here, Thomas." "I understand enough," Thomas replied. "You've been working for Farriman, helping him steal endangered animals." A flicker of genuine surprise crossed Yuri's face. "Is that what you think this is about? Stealing animals?" He laughed, a hollow sound that echoed in the clinical space. "Farriman doesn't want to steal Tara, he wants to eliminate her." Bailey stepped forward, his own weapon trained on Yuri. "Explain." Yuri's gaze moved between them, calculating. "Tara isn't just any white lion. She's the result of a specific genetic program Farriman has been funding for years. He's been breeding white lions, selectively enhancing certain traits while suppressing others." "Why?" Thomas demanded. "For perfect specimens," Yuri said simply. "White lions that would sell for millions to private collectors. But Tara was a mistake. Her genetic markers showed she was carrying recessive genes that threatened the entire program. Genes that might spread to offspring and ruin years of work." Understanding dawned on Thomas. "So instead of culling her, they planted her here." Yuri nodded. "A test, to see if the defective genes would express in a natural environment. I've been monitoring her for years, sending back data, but recently Farriman became impatient. He wanted to retrieve her for further study, then eliminate her from the gene pool." "And the other white lion?" Vivian asked. "The one Bailey saw. One of the new generation, perfect in every way. They brought it to make the switch so no one would know Tara was gone." Yuri's eyes hardened. "But now you've ruined everything. Farriman's men will destroy this entire sanctuary to get what they want." Outside, the sound of vehicles had stopped. The intruders had arrived. "What did you just give her?" Thomas gestured to the syringe with his chin. "Standard sedative," Yuri replied. "Nothing more." "Check," Thomas told Vivian, not taking his eyes off Yuri. She quickly examined the syringe and the monitoring equipment. "He's telling the truth, for once." Bailey secured Yuri's hands with zip ties. "We need to move, now." Tara, still sedated, was already in a transport crate. Together, they carefully loaded her into the vehicle. "The western outpost is still our best bet," Thomas said, climbing into the driver's seat. "Bailey, you said you alerted headquarters. Backup is on the way, but they're at least an hour out. We're on our own until then." Thomas turned to Vivian. "Get Yuri to headquarters. Tell them everything. Bailey and I will take Tara." "I'm coming with you," she insisted. "No, we need someone we trust at headquarters coordinating the response." After a moment of hesitation, she nodded, understanding the logic. As Thomas and Bailey drove away with their precious cargo, they could see flashlights moving near the main buildings. Farriman's men had arrived and were searching for Tara. They drove in tense silence through the darkened sanctuary, taking little-used service roads. The western outpost was remote, accessible only by a series of increasingly rough tracks that wound through dense brush and rocky outcroppings. "How long have you been with this intelligence network?" Thomas asked finally. "Since before I came to the sanctuary," Bailey admitted. "We've been tracking Farriman's operation for nearly a decade. He's careful, insulated by layers of middlemen. This is the closest we've ever gotten to solid evidence against him." "And you never told me." Bailey's expression softened in the dim light. "I couldn't. But for what it's worth, everything else was real. My love for this place, these animals. You've been like a son to me, Thomas." Before Thomas could respond, a spotlight suddenly illuminated their vehicle from behind. A black SUV had appeared on the track behind them, gaining rapidly. "We've got company," Bailey warned, reaching for his rifle. Thomas pressed the accelerator, but the transport vehicle, weighed down by Tara's crate, couldn't outrun the pursuing SUV. A shot rang out, striking the vehicle's rear tires. "They're trying to disable us, not kill us," Bailey noted. "They still want Tara alive." The transport vehicle lurched as a tire blew out, forcing Thomas to stop. They were less than a mile from the outpost, in a clearing surrounded by acacia trees. "We make our stand here," Thomas decided, grabbing his own rifle. They took cover behind the vehicle as the SUV stopped at a distance, its headlights illuminating the clearing. 3 men emerged, carrying automatic weapons. "We only want the lion," one called out. "Hand her over and you can walk away." "Wildlife intelligence," Bailey shouted back. "Drop your weapons, you're surrounded." A laugh floated across the clearing. "Nice try, old man. We know it's just the two of you." Thomas and Bailey exchanged glances. They were outgunned and outnumbered. Suddenly a low growl emanated from the transport crate. Tara was waking up. "The sedative is wearing off," Thomas whispered. "If she gets agitated in that crate, she could hurt herself," Bailey finished. "We need to end this quickly." One of the men started advancing toward them, weapon raised. "Last chance. The lion, or your lives." Thomas took a deep breath, preparing to stand up and confront them, when an extraordinary sound filled the night air. The resonant roar of a lion. But it wasn't coming from Tara's crate. It was coming from the darkness beyond the clearing. The men froze, turning toward the sound. Another roar, closer this time, followed by another. And then, emerging from the shadows like ghosts, came lions. Not just one or two, but an entire pride, moving with deadly purpose toward the intruders. And at their head, magnificent in the moonlight, was a white lion, the one Bailey had seen that morning. "Impossible," Thomas breathed. The men panicked, firing wildly into the air before racing back to their vehicle. The lions charged, not at Thomas and Bailey, but at the retreating intruders. The SUV peeled away, vanishing into the night, pursued for a short distance by several lions before they melted back into the darkness, all except the white lion, which approached the transport vehicle cautiously. "Don't move," Bailey warned. Thomas couldn't have moved if he wanted to, transfixed by the sight before him. The white lion, a young male with a mane just beginning to develop, circled the vehicle once, then stopped near Tara's crate. A soft, chuffing sound emerged from his throat. From inside the crate, Tara responded with a similar sound. "They know each other," Thomas whispered. Bailey nodded slowly. "Tara must have bred with wild lions before she was captured. That young male could be her offspring," Thomas finished. "That would explain the genetic concerns Yuri mentioned. She passed on the white gene to wild lions, outside of Farriman's control." The young white lion stayed near the crate for several minutes, communicating in soft vocalizations with Tara, before finally retreating into the darkness with the rest of the pride. "Did that really just happen?" Thomas asked, still stunned. Bailey's weathered face broke into a smile. "In all my years in the field, I've never seen anything like it. It's as if they knew she needed help." By dawn, reinforcements had arrived. Farriman's men had fled, but not before several were captured by sanctuary rangers at the main gate. Yuri was in custody, cooperating in exchange for leniency, providing detailed evidence about Farriman's breeding program and smuggling network. Tara, fully awake now, had been moved to a secure enclosure at the outpost. Thomas stood watching her pace, her white coat glowing in the early morning light. Vivian joined him, coffee in hand. "Wildlife intelligence has confirmed everything. International warrants are being issued for Farriman and his associates. Bailey's testimony will be key to the case." "And Tara?" "That's more complicated," she admitted. "She's not entirely wild, given her origin, but she's been living free for years now." Thomas thought about the young white male, about the mysterious way the pride had appeared just when needed. "She belongs here," he said firmly. "With her family." "Her family?" Vivian raised an eyebrow. Thomas told her about the white male lion and his theory. "So she managed to pass on her genes to the wild population before Farriman's people could recapture her," Vivian mused. "Nature finding a way." Exactly. And now there's a naturally occurring white lion in the wild, free from any breeding program. Thomas smiled at the thought, Pharaoh's worst nightmare. 3 months later, Thomas stood on a ridge overlooking a vast expanse of savanna. Beside him, Bailey checked the tracking equipment. Since the incident, they had been monitoring both Tara and the wild pride that had come to their rescue that night. "Signal's strong," Bailey reported. "They're just beyond that copse of trees." Thomas raised his binoculars. In the distance, he could make out the pride, resting in the shade. Tara was among them, having been gradually reintroduced to her family group. The young white male, now confirmed through DNA testing to be her offspring, lay nearby. "She's truly home now," Thomas said softly. Bailey nodded. "And Pharaoh's operation is dismantled. Wildlife intelligence caught him trying to flee to a non-extradition country last week. The evidence Yuri provided was the final nail in his coffin. I still can't believe Yuri turned so easily." "Self-preservation," Bailey shrugged, "and perhaps a touch of conscience." He admitted he'd grown attached to Tara over the years, despite his role. Said he delayed reporting certain genetic markers to Harrington to protect her. Thomas watched as Tara rose and moved toward her son, the two white lions striking against the golden landscape. So much trouble over genetics and breeding programs, when nature had already found the perfect balance. "That's always been humanity's problem," Bailey replied, "trying to control what should be left free." The sanctuary had changed since that night. New security protocols were in place, and Thomas had been promoted to head of field operations. The story of Tara had brought international attention and funding, allowing them to expand their anti-poaching efforts across the region. But more importantly, the experience had reminded Thomas why he had chosen this path in the first place, not just to protect animals from human greed, but to protect the delicate balance of nature itself, a balance that sometimes revealed its wisdom in the most unexpected ways. As the sun began to set, painting the savanna in gold and amber, Thomas took one last look at the white lions through his binoculars. Tara seemed to sense his gaze, turning to look directly at him across the distance. For a moment, those intelligent blue eyes seemed to hold his, acknowledging the journey they had shared. Then she turned away, rejoining her pride, a free creature in a wild land, exactly as she was meant to be. Thomas lowered the binoculars, a sense of peace settling over him. In trying to save Tara, he had discovered something far more valuable than any rare specimen. The reminder that true beauty comes not from control or ownership, but from allowing nature's own wisdom to unfold. "Ready to head back?" Bailey asked. Thomas nodded, but his gaze remained on the distant pride for a moment longer. "You know, I used to think my job was just about protecting animals from humans. Now I realize it's also about protecting humans from themselves, from their own worst impulses to possess and control what should remain wild." Bailey clapped him on the shoulder. "That, my friend, is the wisdom that separates true guardians from mere keepers." As they walked back to their vehicle, Thomas knew that somewhere in the gathering dusk, a white lioness moved freely with her pride, her genetic legacy continuing naturally in the son she had managed to produce against all odds. Not as a specimen in someone's collection, but as a wild creature, her ivory coat a flash of light in the darkness of the savanna. Some treasures, Thomas had learned, were never meant to be possessed, only protected, respected, and ultimately set free. Thank you for joining me on this journey into the world of captivating stories. I trust you found today's narrative as engaging as I did. If you enjoyed this exploration into fascinating and compelling narratives, kindly indicate your appreciation by liking this video. Are you watching on mobile? Show your appreciation with a double tap for hype. For more captivating stories and journeys into the heart of compelling storytelling, please subscribe to the channel and activate notifications so you don't miss a single upload. Your thoughts and interpretations are most welcome. Please share your perspectives on today's story in the comments below. And if you believe others would find this content engaging, please consider sharing the video with your network. Until our next journey into the world of captivating tales, I bid you farewell.